Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and let's break down Marvel's Loki Season 1, Episode 5, Journey into Mystery, The Void episode. Journey into Mystery was the title of the original comic run that introduced Loki and Thor, and ahead of Season 2, we are doing a Loki 1 rewatch, and we were able to find even more details and Easter eggs, even a new deleted scene. So let's check out this crazy episode of Loki Season 1 with a fresh set of eyes, and talk about how there might actually be Teletubbies bopping around the void. Okay, the Journey into Mystery comics were originally a horror anthology that then morphed into big monster stories, and this is the most horror-y episode of Loki thus far. And we do see a giant monster. But first, we open on the chronomonitor screen, which this time shows Vormir, Seoul, South Korea, Zimbabwe, and Oak Island, Nova Scotia, which has been a point of interest for treasure hunters for years due to rumors of famous riches and artifacts being buried there, including Marie Antoinette's jewels and the Holy Grail. The camera flips upside down, and we get this inverted shot of the TVA, signifying how this world has been turned upside down by the revelation that everything about this place is a lie. Despite that, all the office drones, who we know now are all variants, go about their day to complete their mundane tasks blissfully unaware. The camera rotates as the back wall dissolves into the Timekeeper elevator doors, which then dissolves into their chamber right after the battle, severed android heads still on the floor. Smoke billows forth on the ground, and the shot transitions to the smoky, cloudy void, with the camera flying over the ruins of this place. We see a bunch of interesting Easter eggs and famous locations from real-world history, like the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that became an abandoned ruin after being damaged in multiple earthquakes. There's also a pruned Sanctum Sanctorum, Kang Tower, QENG. That's the version of Avengers Tower that Mr. Griffin, one of Kang's identities, bought from Tony Stark in the comics, and we saw, I think, a Mr. Griffin as a Kang variant at the end of Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania. Across from the tower is a building labeled Ken Park 2018. 2018 would be right around the snap, which might be when Kang Enterprises moved into the tower in the 616 MCU. The camera pushes in on Loki and the variants standing in front of a pruned bus stop, and they waste no time.
What is this place? Where are we? Who are you?
This is the void, that's Alioth. We're his lunch, come on!
In the comics, Alioth was the first being who broke free from the constraints of time. It's a trans-temporal entity that destroys everything in its path and causes massive disturbances across timelines. Kang eventually trapped Alioth by creating a barrier that it couldn't cross. But here in the MCU, Alioth acts as a kind of guard dog for the void. Director Kate Herron said Alioth's design was inspired by a few things, like thermal lightning and volcanic eruptions, and that she wanted to tease the full reveal for as long as possible, just like the shark in Jaws. Sylvie finally gets to confront Renslayer.
This is it, isn't it? This is where you dragged me after you stole my life.
The mission she's been on for countless years to kill all those responsible for disrupting her happy childhood and destroying everything. Renslayer talks Sylvie out of killing her by claiming that she wants answers too. We know from a later scene that Renslayer was a regular teacher or high school principal on Earth at some point in time in Fremont, Ohio, 2018, but she was very chill when she saw that the Timekeeper was an android, and I think she knows more than she's letting on in this moment. She explains how the void works.
When we prune a branched reality, it's impossible to destroy all its matter. Basically, the branch timeline isn't reset. It's transferred.
To where?
Renslayer is appealing to the law of conservation of matter, the first law of thermodynamics, that says matter cannot be destroyed, only transferred. Renslayer says that the dogma states that the Timekeepers are transforming the void into a utopia. When creating the void, Kate Herron said that she wanted it to be drab and desolate, and upon seeing the constructed set, she joked that she had essentially created England, her home country. But she was also inspired by the Teletubbies, stating, quote, "I wanted the void to feel like a kind of overgrown garden because it's like this forgotten place. It's like the Teletubbies. It's like rolling hills of dystopia, but it's not sunny. It's got this kind of mist." So yeah, definitely not a utopia. We cut back to the void and more ruins visible. A 3-masted wooden ship that appears to be the Mary Celeste, a merchant ship that was found and abandoned adrift in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. To this day, no one has any idea what happened to the crew. So maybe they're all pruned variants working for the TVA now, or they were gobbled up by Alioth. There's also a huge flying saucer, and then what looks like Red Skull's spinning rocket from the first Captain America film, which was based on a real German World War II fighter plane. The Lokis pass by these bird creatures that are named Narvas, after Loki's head of production design, Kazra Farhani's daughter Narva, and Kazra Farhani is actually going to direct a season 2 episode. We also see several bald head statues partially buried in the ground that look kind of like the big head sculpture in Canmore in Alberta, Canada. Farhani said, quote, "Originally, at some point, I was proposing a far more Salvador Dali-esque, Dada-esque version of the void, and it evolved over time, but those those bird creatures and heads made it through from the Dada-esque version to the English Moors version of the Void. Man, they're really beating up on England. I think it's a beautiful country. Loki argues with his variants. Classic Loki, Richard E. Grant, dressed in Loki's 1962 Jack Kirby designed attire from the comics. There's boastful Loki, whose clothes look like the Dark Reign era of Loki. He wields a version Mjolnir made from a piston and a piece of train rail. Kid Loki, who carries Loki's Leviatine sword, and Alligator Loki, an original variant for this series. He was designed by Industrial Light and Magic, and they used a real-life emotional support alligator named Wally to get his movements right. He's fully CGI, but they had a stuffed stand-in during filming, and I would just love to see that footage. They walk by a huge pile of TVA cafeteria lunch trays, because why clean them when he can just print them? And then Kid Loki reveals that his Nexus event was that he killed Thor. This explains why the others treat him with such respect, and the look on our Loki's face after this proves that he's fully one of the good guys now, because he is shook and sad. There is a giant yellow jacket helmet, the suit worn by Darren Cross and Ant-Man before he ended up in the quantum realm and got turned into MODOK. We also see the Thanos copter from when Spider-Man fought Thanos in the Spidey Super Stories comic from the late 70s. Next to it is this big warhead that matches the yellow and black on the copter. The production designer said the bomb was an homage to Dr. Strangelove, but with a Japanese atom bomb. I love that being an alternate timeline that, like, you know, Harry S. Truman could have found a way to prune because he really wanted to bomb Japan and then yell in Oppenheimer's face. The Lokis enter a hatch in the ground, just like the hatch in Lost. And the camera travels downward, and a floorboard gag shows a bunch of stuff buried underneath. We see more lunch trays and silverware, Mjolnir, and then a jar with T65 on the label, and trapped inside is Throg, the Thor variant that we first saw in Thor comic issue 365. We recently got a deleted scene from the season 1 physical media release showing this little guy voiced by Chris Hemsworth.
Ah, damn.
You turned me into a frog!
Now, this layer is a 360-degree set that Farhani imagined as a fractured bowling alley with a slide element to it. All the lines there are visually drawing your eye to the throne, which we imagine was an old Santa throne from a mall, pulled from a deleted reality. You can actually see big old candy canes surrounding it. There's also a space mission pinball game from arcades in the mid-70s, and a Polybius arcade box, which is part of an urban legend from the Portland area in the 80s that claimed the government rigged up this highly addictive game for hypnosis and mind control purposes. And then one night, men in black showed up and took all the machines away. Renslayer and Ms. Minutes, meanwhile, try to stall Sylvie by pretending there's a spacecraft that can travel into the void.
Find Loki.
Find the man behind the curtain.
And kill him.
Yet another in a long line of Wizard of Oz references. We'll meet the wizard in the final episode. Renslayer and Ms. Minutes have terrible poker faces, by the way. Sylvie sees right through this ruse, and again, for the second time in this series, Sylvie steals Renslayer's temp pad. She knows she has only one move left, and that is to prune herself.
Oh, one-shot energy, huh? I think I'll try it. Whoa! So what does one shot's focus shoe do? Whoa, so one shot really is all you need. Begin your transformation with one shot energy today by going to oneshotenergy.com/newrockstars for 10% off your order. Back in the Loki Lair, they listened to Mike Flowers' Pop's cover of Wonderwall, described in the captions as pleasant music. Okay, it's an intentionally hokey cover of the Oasis song. They drink Roxy wine, exceptional Pinot Noir, box wine from Roxcart. Classic Loki pours some box wine down Loki Gator's open maw. Our Loki has a tiny chalice compared to the others. Kid Loki drinks a Hi-C Ecto Cooler, which is a promotional tie-in to the real Ghostbusters animated series in the 80s. In previous episodes, we saw a Josta and a Boku, other discontinued drinks. In the center of the circle of chairs, there is a campfire of charred bowling pins. Next to Alligator Loki is The Mystery and Lore of Monsters by C.J.S. Thompson, a rare 1930 book with accounts of major lore, legends, and human deformities. Boastful Loki boasts of getting all 6 Infinity Stones after defeating Cap and Iron Man, and he has at least one doubter.
That's alligator for growling and saying liar at the same time.
I love how classic Loki always understands what Alligator Loki is saying, kind of like Rocket and Groot. Gator Loki launches himself at boastful Loki and goes straight for his hand, like what he does later to President Loki, or like the crocodile that ate Captain Hook's hand. Classic Loki explains how he survived Thanos.
I cast a projection of myself so real, even the mad Titan believed it. Then hid as inanimate debris.
Loki writer Michael Waldron said that he came up with his backstory after wondering what would have happened if Loki had survived his death in Infinity War. He added, quote, "It was that tragic thing where he finally realizes I'm meant to be alone. It was just so sad. There's a real lesson there for our Loki in that he's going to reject that notion that this tiger can change his stripes and he refuses to be alone. Loki wants to do the right thing. He wants to see if he can have a real relationship in his life." And I have to give a quick aside here, because this whole theory of a piece of debris floating behind Thanos as he choked Loki in Infinity War was absolutely a theory that I discussed on the new Rockstars channel all the way back in 2018. So sure, Michael Waldron probably came up with it on his own, but I just think it's awesome vindication for all of us theorists back in 2018 that this ridiculous theory actually has some plausibility to it. Okay, so Loki meets with another group of variants led by President Loki from the 2016 comic miniseries Vote Loki, in which Loki ran for president of the United States on a bonkers campaign based around admitting to lying to the public. We also see a variant with a helmet with a bike handlebar for horns, one with a helmet of silverware, one with this Russian style hat with spiky things coming out of it, one holding a ball and chain, and this bearded one who we actually saw already, labeled variant L8914 back in episode 2. One thing I want to point out about this hatch is that it actually has some Hindi writing on it, because the whole idea of this hatch is that it was going to be taken from an Indian nuclear submarine. Okay, Sylvie kicks out the front of the windshield on the school bus that she woke up in, and in the background we see the pruned ruins of a suspension bridge that kind of looks like a cross between Golden Gate Bridge and Oakland Bay Bridge. The Oakland Bay Bridge, better bridge. It's underrated. Golden Gate Bridge is fine. Oakland just looks so much cooler. Alioth sits down on the bus and you can see that it sort of rots it, eroding it further. So you definitely don't want this thing touching you. Later, it does the same thing to the crew of the USS Eldridge. Sylvie enchants a branch of Alioth and gets a vision of what it is guarding: a rock ring suspended at the end of time, a citadel in a lit tower. Mobius saves her in the nick of time by driving up in a Datsun Bluebird wagon with a spring-mounted pizza slice on top, courtesy of Skinny's Pizza. The plate number is GRNW1D, a nod to Marvel writer and Alioth creator Mark Gruenwald. In the comics, Mobius was actually modeled after Gruenwald's appearance. Mobius pulls up next to a sign for Wrightville Theater. Wrightsville was mentioned in episode 4 as one of the places where an apocalyptic event took place. The theater is actually screening Oswald and the Martian, a reference to the 1930 Disney animated short Mars, in which Oswald the Lucky Rabbit meets the Martian King. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit also made a bit of a cameo in Multiverse of Madness. Our guy's getting his MCU day. Inside the car, there is a hula girl on the dash, and WandaVision, the ice cream truck that Darcy and Vision steal, also has a hula girl, and one also significantly popped up repeatedly in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Alioth follows them with pillars of smoke that look very much like the smoke monster from Lost. Mobius makes a hard right in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza and a pruned sphinx with its nose still attached. There's also a structure in the back on the right that kind of looks like the Parthenon in Greece. Not sure though. The Lokis betray each other for power, and our Loki shakes his head in disgust at their pettiness.
You led the wolves to our door!
We prefer snakes to wolves.
I've eaten both. They die just the same.
Could be a nod to Jormungandr, the great snake, and Fenrir, the wolf, or Fenris in the MCU, Loki's offspring in Norse mythology. Alligator Loki bites off President Loki's hand, and all hell breaks loose as everyone fights everyone. Our Loki tiptoes through the chaos, and we get this cheery rock remix of the usually dark and moody Loki theme music. Classic Loki escaped death at Thanos' hand by using conjure magic while he snuck away, and he does the same thing here to allow himself, our Loki, and Kid Loki, and Alligator Loki to escape outside. He says this:
We lie and we cheat. We cut the throat of every person who trusts us, and for what? Power. Glorious power. Glorious purpose. Cannot change. We're broken. Every version of us forever.
This was Loki's big fear, but his trust of Sylvie convinces the others to help him get past Alioth. The USS Eldridge drops into the void, and its crew still on board. This was a US Navy destroyer that was decommissioned and sold for scrap, but became part of a conspiracy theory stating that it was part of the Philadelphia experiment that rendered it invisible. Renslayer uses her tempad to summon Miss Minutes, who actually walks with her down the hallway like they're in the weirdest episode of an Aaron Sorkin show ever. The Loki group comes up with a game plan. At Dom's Cuts barbershop, while roasting one of the Narvas over an open fire, Kid Loki asks Mobius what happens if he gets back to the TVA.
People know the truth.
So just like that, you're turning on the very thing you devoted your life to.
It's never too late to change.
Classic Loki takes that in and really considers it. After just saying that a Loki can never change, he got 2 back-to-back examples that it is possible. And this is a moment he likely thinks back to later in the episode when he sacrifices himself, this time for real. One of the Narvas runs on top of a Chrysler TVA, a tank designed by Chrysler in the 1950s that never ended up in production. As the group stares at Alioth, we see the Dark Aster. That was Ronan's ship from Guardians of the Galaxy, which got destroyed during the Battle of Xandar. Loki asks Mobius,
"What will you do at the TVA? Burn it to the ground."
This is a callback to Loki's promise to do the same in episode 1.
I'm gonna burn this place to the ground.
Also, the fact that he says this while his face is over the shoulder says that he could be whispering it both into the ear of the person that he's hugging and to the person he's looking at. They both can take the compliment. They probably will because they're both, ego-filled. Now, in the distance, we see the head of the Statue of the Living Tribunal, the 3-headed cosmic entity tasked with overseeing and judging the multiverse, whom we see in Thor: Love and Thunder and in a quick glimpse in Multiverse of Madness. And then, right before Alioth obscures it, we actually get a glimpse of the Hydra helicarrier, a helicarrier controlled by Hydra. That might be connected to the Multiverse of Madness version of the Hydra reality where Hydra took over. Remember the Hydra blimp? There's also piles of bones, which might belong to the Leviathans. Those were the creatures that the Chitauri used during the Battle of New York. Loki waves his flaming sword, trying to distract Alioth the way Alan Grant waved the flare around in Jurassic Park to distract the T-Rex, but it doesn't work because, as classic Loki said earlier,
But blades are worthless in the face of a Loki sorcery. They stunt our magical potential.
So classic Loki steps in and does his thing, and it's written all over his face that this is his true glorious purpose. Natalie Holt's music is incredible. She used a 32-voice choir for the vocals, and it also samples Wagner's Norse-inspired Ride of the Valkyries, the music that played at the beginning of Apocalypse Now. Classic Loki casts an illusion of Asgard, and even after all of these years, he remembers every little detail of it, which makes me wonder if, in those years of lonely self-exile, he would cast these illusions just to get a glimpse of home. Loki and Sylvie gaze on in wonder, and next to them is a Burger Chef sign. That was a real-life burger chain that was eventually bought out by Hardee's. The illusion fades, and classic Loki apparently gets consumed, although I have hopes we will see him again in season 2 somehow. Richard E. Grant is just so great in this role. Even before he was cast, he was the one they wanted for it, their first and only choice, and his face was even used in the concept art. Sylvie and Loki successfully enchant Alioth. They are bathed in this green light as if they are looking upon Oz's Emerald City, and hand in hand, they walk towards the citadel of He Who Remains. Okay, later today, you're gonna see our breakdown of season 2, episode 1 after that episode comes out, but we're still gonna finish out this rewatch series, our re-breakdown of episode 6 for All Time Always. The final episode of season 1 is gonna be coming out next week, and we're gonna look again closely at every little thing He Who Remains says, because I think it's gonna be really important to understand season 2. Please subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network. You can follow me at EA Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.